Good evening again, race fans. Welcome back to Trust the Profits. I'm your host, Colin Sheehan. This is Doubling Down, where we put together a daily double ticket for you, and it's the summer of Saratoga. And I got a little confession to make because I have to admit, over the last couple of months, Doubling Down has followed the Derby Trail, the Triple Crown races, the stakes races. My confession is you follow those because those are the interesting races for people to get clicks, right? Well, I've gotten away from being a little bit more selective in the races that I do for this show. And I think that that has, in effect, definitely forced my ROI to go down. Because if you remember in the beginning of this show, when we would pick out a couple random races, especially me and Vinny, we would do a lot better. And I went on Keith's value picks this week and gave out 8-1 in at Saratoga in my second race, and then the third race I gave out another 8-1, and I had an 8-1 that ran second, and that had me thinking, going, you know what, I got to do a better job of getting back to what this show is about, which is going through the card and finding the value, finding some races where we're going to get some prices, and that I have a stronger opinion rather than just following. For example, it would have been easy to go over to Monmouth this weekend and hit up Haskell. So we'll see how we do to try and get away from the 1 out of 2s we've been getting, although last week we went 0 for 2. Matt went 1 for 2. And we're trying to catch up to Vinny, who's been the one that's been on fire lately. And to add to that, as I've said from episode 1, as we get close to episode 80 on here, to try to bring to you as many different voices that we can on this show. So you see their names both on other YouTube channels, maybe across Twitter. And so we will introduce to you another new voice here on this week's episode of Doubling Down. So let's get to it. That's right. You'll recognize a new face, or maybe not. It's Josh Rodriguez from On the Wrong Lead over on YouTube, doing live streams. Seems like nonstop, Josh. Every time you're the ones that I'm getting all the notifications. I don't even get notifications for Trust the Profits. My notifications pop up for On the Wrong Lead. Welcome to Doubling Down. How we doing?
Pretty good. Yeah, it's the last couple of months I feel like it's been a lot more steady with the content, with the live stream and 2 podcasts a week, and I tend to record all of them. So it's my face is probably in way too many places, but it's been a while since I've done a video with you guys over here, and when you asked me, I was absolutely thrilled to come on here, and I think you picked an interesting double sequence here, and I was able to find a pretty strong opinion in here, and hopefully we'll make some money.
Absolutely. And I'm going to let you know, Josh, that this isn't just going to be you from On the Wrong Lead. I'm going to get all 3 of you over the course of the next month. So that way you guys will have a little fodder over on your channel, and you can, hopefully you have some bragging rights over Mark and Caleb as we work our way up to Whitney weekend, which I think we're all going to have a nice little get together of joining the channels of Trust the Profits and On the Wrong Lead. So I'm looking forward to meeting so many of these individuals we do these streams with in person. So that's going to be a good time. Are you going to Whitney?
Unfortunately, no. I am going to be going to, funny enough, a disc golf tournament.
Fun.
It's the one big one I play every year, and it happens to fall on Whitney weekend. I don't think I'm making it to Saratoga this year. I think I decided that I'm going to be doing Breeders' Cup. So I've never been to California. So Caleb was able to spike a Breeders' Cup seat. You can ask him all about just the magnificent skill he used to spike that seat. It's a great story, but we're looking at an Airbnb. Mark's probably gonna come out too, so I figured I'll use my PTO and my frequent flyer miles to hit up San Diego for the first time. So should be fun.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Cannot argue with that. I had my eyes on maybe making it down to Kentucky Downs as my new track this year. So we will see. But for this show, we put together daily doubles. Very easy, Josh. Is daily double a bet that's in your repertoire that you're comfortable using? Do you use it a lot? Is it one of your go-to bets?
I use it in 2 ways. One, if I have a real strong opinion in a race and I'm going to win bet a horse, or I find maybe like a single or something in the sequence, I'll use the daily double as a way to kind of reinforce that strong opinion. The Wolf of Oak Lawn and I always talk about, the pick four. Well, God made the pick four for when you get bounced from the pick five, right? So eventually, right, you keep on getting bounced and bounced and bounced, and then you get down to the daily double, right? But no, in fairness, I usually use it if I have a strong opinion in a race, if I'm win betting a horse, and in this case, I feel like I do have a pretty strong opinion, and I think I'm going to have a nice little double here.
That's awesome. I tell my viewers you do the opposite, Josh. You're supposed to learn how to play the daily double before you go to the pick five. But you're the first one that has come on the channel over all these episodes and said, no, you do the opposite. You should start with your five, and then eventually you're down to a two, and hopefully that's how you can cash out on
Don't
some of
be
my
me.
opinions.
Don't be me. Don't play like me. No, be more disciplined.
That's right. Well, you can't hit five if you can't hit two. So let's jump into it. We're starting. We decided to go race 9 and race 10 for Saturday, July 20th at Saratoga. I've always said on this channel, and I think the people that have followed, my strength tends to be on the turf. So why not pick 2 turf races? As you heard in my opening, I'm getting away from just following the clicks, and let's see if we can start getting back to hitting some winners as I did with Keith last week. We have an allowance optional claimer going 1.1 miles on the turf for 4-year-olds and up. And I thought this sequence back to back was pretty difficult for me as I went through it a few times. RaceLens obviously has a couple angles here that pop up immediately that I have circled. One is Major Dude, who's a horse that was his sire sales were less than 25,000, whose last purchase was over 250,000. That's been a positive angle. And then Cash Equity actually has that exact same angle as well. As we look into the PPs, Josh, you liked 3 horses in here. Where would you like to start?
Yeah, so we'll start with my top pick in here, which is the number 6, Cash Equity. You get Tyler Gaffleone riding for Saffie Joseph Jr. And, when I'm looking at my PPs, I see a ton of plus signs, which means that there are a lot of angles here that, really, really kind of working towards this horse. Saffie is 23% third off the layoff. He's good, with these turf horses. He's good shipping these horses in. Tyler rides for him pretty frequently. He's 2 for 9 over the last 2 months riding for him. So you see a lot of those statistics, pointing the right way. But what really kind of put this horse on as kind of my top pick in the spot was I've watched all of the races at Saratoga on this turf course, and it really feels like the front end is just absolutely dead right now. You want to be coming from off the pace and really closing. I use another tool called Optics EQ, which kind of gives you like a visual representation of the pace. And in this race, they seem that they have a pretty high speed rate. And if you kind of look through a lot of these horses, you do see, what looks to be a few front runners up here. And with the amount of pace that's coming in here, I really think it's going to set up for this 6, who is a dead closer, and has really got a nice closing kick. Just missed last time out, second by a head at Churchill Downs, which is just a funky turf course. Ever since they've replaced that turf course, it's just been really hard to handicap. But if you go back to something a little bit more fair, like the Santa Anita course, was able to close into a bit of a pace there. Del Mar handicap going even further back. This horse does have some sneaky little back class in there. So yeah, I think that this is a really interesting horse. I think this is probably your best closer and is going to be my top pick in here in a race that I think there's going to be a fair bit of speed.
Yeah, so interesting. I'm going to use this 6 as well. So we did have one opinion the same over the course of these two races, and the 6 is that one horse. I do agree with you. I love horses closing late on all turf courses, not just how it's been up at Saratoga. It's an angle that I think is more successful on turf than dirt, and more successful that, like you said, up at Saratoga. There's one thing I disagree with you on is I don't know how much early speed there actually is, which is going to lead to my second pick, which we'll get to in a second. And the other thing you didn't mention, which is a positive for this horse, is they're going 1.125 miles. And this horse at that distance 4 times, a victory in 2 seconds. And it's not a race that you have a bunch of horses that have had a ton of success at the mile and the eighth. And to me, when it's a mile and an eighth, I do pay more attention to horses for distance at that distance, as opposed to, like, 6 furlongs, 7 furlongs, mile, where you're just going to have a bunch of horses that are probably can adjust to those more comfortably, maybe then stepping up to something such as this mile and an eighth. I mentioned some of that, what I thought might be what I saw as some of the only early speed, and that was this 9, Steady On. The only horse that I had actually written down as the early speeds, coming second off the layoff, switching over to Dylan Davis. The last race, this horse had to break out and then get into the rail, got behind some horses, and then flattened out in the stretch. I'm hoping that horse just needed a race. If it gets back to how this horse was racing last year, where it had some pretty consistent victories, they were, it's maiden and then allowance, but then ran second at a stakes level, second at stakes level again, second in a grade 3, then won the stakes level in the Appleton. That was all last year. The horse is going to have to get back to those races. And obviously he's going to have to get the distance. So a little bit of a contrary to what I said on the 6. Going to use the 9 for that reason of hopefully second off the layoff is an improvement. And if it runs like it did in the Appleton, I think the horse absolutely fits here at 6-1. So I'll use 6 and 9 to start. Where else are you going to go?
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of continue with the closer angle. We'll go with the longer of the 3 horses I have, and that's the 4, Harlan Estate, for Beckman Whitworth here. Junior Alvarado's riding, and once again, this is a horse that when I look at the optics plot is one that just absolutely jumps off the page. Is a big Q4 square, which tells you that this is a closer with a really good closing kick. You kind of look at that last race and actually kind of like the last 3 races, and they don't look that great. I mean, we're really going back to the Churchill Downs race, probably about 5 back in end of November, and that race looks to be pretty solid here. It looks to be one that kind of fits in here. The Fairgrounds course is not very kind to closers, so you can kind of put a line through that. And then obviously you had a grade 3 that they ran at Turfway Park, not really the surface I think this one wants to run on. And then that Churchill Downs try, just horse kind of came up empty. So obviously we're crossing a lot of lines through a lot of races in this spot, but you're getting 20 to 1. You're getting 20 to 1 here, and you're getting a horse that I think does have a little bit of back class. It has won a stakes race at Kentucky Downs, and has run well at the grade 3 level. So I thought that this one was a little bit interesting. Beckman Whitworth, not really a really household name, I think, in New York. He's started to kind of come on a little bit recently in Kentucky, and I really think that this is just kind of like a sneaky sleeper horse. It fits well on the plot, and it's going to be the longest price in this race. So I thought this was just kind of a nice little bomb play. And then the other horse I'm going to use is really
Let me add in there, though, if you look at the bottom here on the dam stats, lifetime turf on the routes, 21 starts, 3 wins, but getting some nice prices there with 159 positive ROI. So definitely brings through some bombs on the turf on this dam side.
Yeah, for sure. And the other horse I'm going to use here is really, I guess, kind of the big question mark in all of this, and that's going to be the 8, and the winner is. This is a horse that Wayne Catalano ran in the BC Juvenile Turf back in 2022 when at Keeneland. I was actually at that Breeders' Cup, and funny story is I got a paddock pass for that last race on Friday from a good friend of mine, and as I was standing in the paddock. And the winner was my pick going into it before I got into the paddock. That I loved this horse going into that race, and all of a sudden this horse just goes past me, And I'm not a person. I did not grow up around horses. I don't know horse flesh whatsoever. I am definitely not a Jessica Tugwell. I am not a Maggie Wolfendale.
Maggie. Yeah.
I would, but this horse walked past me, and literally the only thing that I could think is that is a horse. It ended up being the winner, Victoria Road, who ended up going off at like 4.5 to 1 or something. I ended up getting a pretty good price. I had such a bad day. I literally sent the house on that horse, and basically, kind of brought me back to
Five and a half
even
to
on that
one.
once. Yeah,
Yep.
5.5 to 1. It was a nice little. It made up for a lot of sins that day, but that was yeah. I was high on this horse back then. Obviously, was like I said in Wayne Catalano's barn, and then all of a sudden he ends up in Chad Brown's barn. I mean, that's kind of strange. You don't see Chad take courses like this very often. Um, you know, so my guess is that he's pretty well meant in this spot. Um, and you see Joel Rosario getting aboard, and you're probably like, oh, like he's not doesn't have any of his good riders on here. None of Chad's riders are here. They're all at
Right.
Monmouth,
Yep.
right? So Joel normally is like if you're watching a turf stakes at Saratoga, and we have our usual 6 or 7 Chad Brown horses. Joel's normally on like the fourth one, maybe
Yep.
the fifth, right? He's not first, second, third call for Chad, but he does ride for him, and yeah, so I think him getting aboard here actually kind of shows that this horse is a little bit well met in this spot. I see 5 to 1 on the morning line. I'd be a little surprised if he goes off that low, just because he's been so just been on the bench for, I think it was like 400 plus days. But you look at the breeding for this horse, and this is just, I mean, this is just a regally bred turf horse. You got Oscar Performance on the top, you got Scat Daddy on the bottom. Yeah, this should be a serious turf horse, and now it's with Chad Brown, and he's immediately putting in this optional claimer, going, I believe the longest distance he's ever run, and I see that pedigree, and I'm like, yeah, this horse wants to run. I mean, give him more distance. So I like the spotting of this. I think this is kind of sneaky. I think the price might float up a little bit. And really, the way I looked at this is at this race is I'm not interested in the top 3 choices whatsoever. Major Dude, I think you've seen what you've seen from him. I really think his best running is done, close to the pace. And I just don't think that that's where you want to be on the track right now. Obviously, we've had a ton of rain, so and we're handicapping as days in front. Thursday, Friday, the turf course could play completely different, and my opinions can't change here. But at least from what I've seen so far, I don't want anybody really close to the front end. So that makes me put a line through the 2. I think the 3 is also one that's kind of forwardly placed. I think he's maybe more push button, but is one, like, if you look at some of his better races, he's two lengths off, a length off at first call. So, just kind of, trying to get around that one. And then a tone. I mean, I'm sick and tired of seeing this horse.
Seriously.
This is the quintessential. You're betting this horse based off a race he ran like 3 years ago.
Yeah, and who's he's been running against?
Yeah, and so I'm just not entirely sure he wants to win anymore. He's run some nice races. I think he's another one. Brisnett's got him kind of marked as an S type. I don't know what kind of running style you got listed on. He looks like
Equibase
a
used him
presser.
as an early presser.
Yeah, they have a
I don't
presser.
necessarily
I
agree
don't
with.
exactly, but that's the thing, is that they don't know how to run, like how this
Yeah,
horse wants
they
to
don't know how to
run.
rein him.
You look back through. I mean, my PPs only go back so far, but you see him trying to wire the dinner party last year at Pimlico, and then you look at the Pegasus World Cup. He's 11th, 7th lengths off in that race.
Yep.
It just feels like they don't really know what to do. with this horse. I think Andrew Champagne, my co-host on Drankin' Champagne, does have an interesting theory on this horse. He thinks that this is a Lasix horse, and he does get Lasix here.
Hmm.
So, I mean, maybe that's an angle here where this horse seems to have run better on Lasix, but
It's maybe, but those two Lasix races were allowance optional claimers that he couldn't even get the job done in those ones either.
yeah, yeah. I
Right?
mean, and you're taking 4-1 on this horse. I mean, this is an absolute trap horse. This is a just a absolute money burner. I want no part of it.
Yeah, so I wanted to go back to who'd you start with? 8. And the winner is. So I had a hard time deciding what to do with this horse, and you definitely highlighted reasons you would accept number 8. And the Chad Brown angle here kind of screws with me because one thing I will never do, and Sean Patrick's kind of talked to me about this. Look how many changes you're getting for this horse, right? It's blinkers off, it's adding Lasix, it's first time gelding, it's in a new barn. Is there guessing here of what this horse really wants? The layoff is another one that you mentioned. I mean, hasn't raced since May of 2023. Those ended up being the reasons, and the Oscar performance I saw, and I'm like exactly how you saw it as well. But when I had to cut my ticket a little bit, and I had to go back and forth, this was definitely one that was right on that cutting line, and I decided to leave off just because of the long layoff and all of those changes that I just mentioned. Now, the good thing for you is first time for Chad, 5 for 25 on the turf over when the horse comes in with an over 180-day layoff. So you have and that's what screws with me, right? It's like, well, you see all these angles you should definitely toss. But then all the data and the numbers say, well, it's Chad Brown. So it's not necessarily a bad time to actually take a shot on a horse that maybe everyone's going to see that and jump off of them like I am, and you're going to slide into that 5-1 and maybe have a good horse there with a nice price. I did end up using Major Dude, the 3-1. He's definitely my smallest price over these two tickets. Those are the only 3 horses that I'm going to use in this leg. The reason I decided to use Major Dude is when I go through a race like a first pass through, Josh. First you go through and you're like, geez, no one really jumps out at me. Then you go through again and you're like, wow, I'm still kind of struggling. There's a couple of things that I then start to rely on. One of those is a horse that has, when it's a 1.1 miles, I'm looking at a horse that's had success over the distance. When it's maybe a particular track such as Saratoga, and in the next leg you've got one horse that's only the horse that has 2 victories over the track, and when none of the other ones even have a victory, something to kind of keep in mind. One thing that I look at is horses that have had success at a grade 2, grade 3 level, which Major Do has. He's a victory at a grade 2. It was the Penn Mile. He's got a victory in a grade 3 in the Kitten's Joy. Those were last year, and I understand that. But he's got that race under his belt at Belmont at Aqueduct. I'm relying a little bit on coming back from that race. He was coming late, and that race was 1 16th. So although he hasn't raced at the distance, that's the next thing I'll kind of look for as well. And 1 16th is a horse that's closing late in that race there. You're adding Johnny V onto Major Dude, which I'm happy about. And the last 3 races have been strong. I mean, he's putting in, from an Equibase standpoint, they're consistently in the 90s. 3-1's probably shorter than I necessarily want on this horse. But one thing that I have also relied on here with Equibase is it's going to highlight all races that the horses run at with purses that are equal or more than today's race. And as you start kind of going through them, although some of them have it, a tone who we talked about, reason we don't want a tone. I'm just kind of relying a little bit on the class that Major Dude has been racing against. And although we might know who he is, hoping that can get back to some of those races that in the past would be enough to get it done here. So I'm going to go 2, 6, 9. Josh is going to go 4, 6, 8 here in the first leg of our daily double. The next race we jump into is the Lake George Stakes. It's going 1 mile on the inner turf. This is race 10 at Saratoga. It is for the fillies, who are 3-year-olds. I texted you and I said, wow, that second leg was tough for me to come on. You're like, I got a single. I'm all set. So let's dive right into who you're going to use on top here in this race. A race that Chad Brown has now won 5 times in a row. He has 2 entered here, oversubscribed, Sweet Rebecca. And an interesting thing, maybe before we get to your single, I think it's interesting that Lucas is trying Lemon Muffin on the turf for the first time. Sired by Collected, who hits at 14% on the turf, but also hits at 14% on the dirt. So you kind of get what you get maybe with the horse, as opposed to expecting that the horse might be better on the turf. You're also getting number 4, who is sired by Collected, who has some success on the turf, if you want to use that angle. So I thought it was interesting to see Lemon Muffin get the switch over here under the Lucas barn.
Yeah, that's that's a little interesting. I don't know if she's kind of entered as a pseudo MTO type here.
True.
As
Yeah.
maybe they're
Good call.
maybe if they think
If it
it comes
rains, yep.
off. Yeah.
Yep.
I will say this race has gotten AE in the 11 Golden Degree that if this horse gets in, I think really, really like hammers home what I think is going to kind of happen here. In that, I do think that there's a bit of pace, especially if this 11 kind of draws in. Golden Degree is definitely got a propensity to go to the lead. I think the 3 horse, is it Monoma
None of
Gold?
gold.
Yeah, has shown a bit of speed. And then you got a couple other tactical type horses in the 7, the 8, and even the 10. And I think you really start to see that, just like we hope that we don't get the Naira special and everyone just pulls back, because I do think that this is going to set up for Chad Brown to win his 6th race in a row. And I have the favorite here. I have the 2 oversubscribed as my lone pick. And this is a horse that won on debut at Tampa, came over to Aqueduct, ran second when she was bet off the board, kind of checked up a little bit in that race. And I see you're pulling up the replay there.
This is the
And
last race. Yep.
oh, the last race, and the last race, just I mean, won as easy as she possibly could have. Flavian Pratt. He was 5 lengths off at the top of the straight and ended up winning by over 3 lengths. And this is a horse that Flavian Pratt would have won or would have ridden this time if he was not at Monmouth. So, you get Joel aboard, who, like I said, does ride for Chad. And this is just, your typical rider to run style, just absolute nice matchup, right? Joel, very patient, loves to save ground, and is just really, really good with these horses. Getting them to calm down and then just make that one run. Obviously, we're looking at the replay here, and you got the kind of 2 runaway horses here.
Yeah, I wanted to point that out because this horse has had success in some of these paces being a lot quicker up on the front end, right? And you'll see
Yeah.
oversubscribed, who's the 9 here. Just, I mean, probably looks a lot faster because of what you saw there on that last shot.
Yeah.
Flying.
And on the figures I'm looking at, right, like not exactly, she's not an absolute standout here on figures, but when like I said, we talked about this with the last race. I want someone coming and closing in this race, and the 2 just looks like absolutely the best closer in this spot, and is where I'm going to have all my money. I do think that the 6, the other Chad Brown horse, Sweet Rebecca, kind of a versatile type. If you look at the maiden breaker, was 6 lengths off at first call and just steadily made up ground to win that race, and then comes over to Chad Brown's barn, wins a stakes race at Aqueduct, and was pretty game, did win, but kind of the same thing, was 2 lengths off and kind of headed the horse and then just kind of found more and ended up winning. And then in the grade 2 last time out, looked to be just another one that kind of maybe found a little bit of trouble in the straight there, and kind of just never was able to make up the ground that I think needed to, kind of regressed a little bit. So maybe some question marks there, but seems to be a horse that doesn't necessarily need to close from the clouds. I think like the 2 is going to need to, so it might be a little bit more forwardly placed. Like I said, if the track is playing more forward, is probably one that I'll have to include. I'll probably use in a longer style wager, like a pick 4 or pick 5, where maybe I use 1 or 2 horses here as opposed to just singling in a double, right? I don't want to give out a $30, a 3x2 or 3x3 double or anything like that. So Sweet Rebecca makes a ton of sense. And I think if you're looking for a bomb, if you're looking for a horse to kind of upset stuff here, I do think the 5 Gala brand, if for some reason this does melt down and the 2, and Joel does Joel things, not the good Joel things, the bad Joel things, Jose Lascano might be able to work out a trip here, and kind of close into it. Now, he was in that same race, or she was in that same race as oversubscribed was with kind of the runoff, and made up significant ground. I mean, made up 15 lengths in total, but wasn't able to was even further behind than where oversubscribed was, right?
Yeah, she's the one here. Watch her out of the gate because she does get bumped pretty hard.
Yeah, and I really do think that, the race was kind of over for him off the start. I mean, okay, you have 2 runaway horses. Maybe you stay within 15 lengths, but we're talking 21 lengths, and was bet in that last start to 5.5 to 1. They obviously thought a lot of this horse. Ran in the juvenile turf last year, the Miss Grillo last year, won the With Anticipation, and beat the boys there. So does have some talent, and has some back class there. Maybe just needs a trip and needs a little bit of a setup.
And don't forget, this was exactly the horse I was talking about, who's 2 for 2 over the Saratoga turf as well. Not something that necessarily you want to totally ignore. I did end up not including the 5, but this was the one that was kind of on my cutting board, and that was specifically what I circled. And I did think that trouble at least at the beginning of that last race was something to talk about. I almost had a single here, and it was the number 8 Pounce. This is a horse that I kind of continued to come back to. Now I know you talked about the pace. This horse has shown the ability to do both, and to me that's always something nice to have in your back pocket. The horse has won wire to wire, and in this race we put up 101 in a grade 3 at Gulfstream, winning by a neck, came from off the pace. Last race out was on the front end. So I like the versatility that Pounce has shown in a race. And I've relied a little bit in this particular race because I went through first time. I'm like, man, Pounce did jump out, but it was a lot closer between everybody else to me, to be able to separate stuff. And so when I started really focusing in on what Equibase gives you a class rating in this race of 101, I start looking at, okay, who's raced in races that are similar to a 101, which is on this left column right here. And then what were the speed figures that the horses were getting in those races? Pounce is one of the few who's got a pretty consistent in that ballpark of what the race has been rated, and the performance was there as well. So Pounce is a horse that I'm going to use. There's 2 green positive success scores here, and they're what I was talking about, which I use this angle primarily to look at my 2-year-olds. What horse has had a sire whose sales was less than 25K? Looking at Lucky, sire fee is 20,000. Sorry, stud fee. And then this horse sold for 370,000. It probably gets a little bit less as important as you start to see more of what the horse can do. However, I'll point out that when I looked at this angle for 3-year-olds, it is a success score of 7.3 with a positive ROI of 22%. So that's not like a top of the list for me priority as I'm handicapping. But when you fall on a horse and you see things you like, and then you see that, it's like, okay, absolutely cannot ignore my boy Pounce. I did end up using the one as well, very similar angle that I just talked about, which is I like the increase in the speed figures here. The last race was that grade 3. And he's coming from Churchill Downs, which hasn't been a bad angle to follow up at Saratoga. Was up close. I'm hoping, unlike what you think might happen, is that some of the horses on the front end on Saturday are going to be where you want to be. So I'm going to use the 1 and the 8. And then, I talked on this channel many times about Game of Silks, and I don't want to get into what's happened with Game of Silks, but in the chat, Manama Gold was this horse that the owner of Manama Gold talked a lot about Manama Gold and expected this horse to going to win the Oaks, and everyone should buy this horse for me because of what she's doing in Maidan, right? And so when I see the horse, I have a little bit of a chuckle. But I will say, Manama Gold in this last race, and it was on the dirt, the stumbled at the start is no joke. This horse really did almost went down at the beginning of this race. So a second place finish after the travel from Maidan. There's a question of what's going to happen moving to the turf, and that is a question mark. But if the horse does what he was doing in Maidan and putting up 105, 103 and takes to the turf, absolutely has an opportunity to make some noise here. And I also like the stretch out. So that last race was at 6 furlongs. The success of this horse was at the longer distances. So we're getting back to the longer distance with Johnny V and out of the Todd Pletcher barn, a horse that I'm going to include in my ticket as well. So I do go 3x3, Josh, but I think I've got some prices covered. If Chad's beat me, they beat me. We're going to try to get by with a couple prices. So I'm going to go 269 with the 138. It'll cost you $9. Josh is going to use his single there, oversubscribed, and go 468 with the 2. It'll only cost you a cup of coffee, maybe a small, right? Small these days for Josh.
You can play it for $2 and get a Starbucks,
There you go. There you go. We always like to say we're not going to get people complaining for how much they're spending watching us. And hopefully we get it home. Matt DeSantis last week he got white beam, but he couldn't close. I went 0 for 2. Vinny's had a couple of great weeks in a row. So the on the lead doubling down challenge for you is now complete. But for the channel of on the wrong lead is not over, because I'm going to get all 3 of you on here. Thank you so much. Give everyone one more shout of what you guys are doing, what you have coming up on your channel.
Yeah, we do our live streams Thursday nights, 7:30 Central, 8:30 Eastern. So you can check that out on YouTube and Twitter, or X as it's called now. Obviously, we're at wrong_lead on Twitter. I am at Cherry Drank on thewronglead.com. We'll try and put some articles and stuff up, and got podcasts and tons of videos, tons of content. So check us out.
These guys do a great job. Please do check them out. Like and subscribe down below if you haven't already. Please put in the comments what your daily double is going to be for race 9 and race 10 on Saturday. Good luck, everybody. Until next time, I'm Colin Sheehan. He's Josh Rodriguez. Have a good day.